Before an evil influence ever strikes a person, it rarely begins with an action. It begins with a conversation. Darkness studies you long before it moves against you. It listens, it probes, it observes, and it tests the borders of your spiritual sensitivity. Many people think attacks begin suddenly. No, attacks begin quietly. They begin with strange questions, unusual inquiries, subtle conversations that seem harmless on the surface, but are designed to open spiritual doors. And anyone who walks with God must train their discernment to recognize when they are no longer dealing with a casual conversation, but with an interrogation from a dark source trying to assess your vulnerability. There are questions that do not come from the mouth of a person. They come from the spirit behind that person. When the wrong spirit wants access into your life, it does not knock with its hand. It knocks with its voice. And if you are spiritually dull, you will laugh, answer carelessly, and then wonder why you suddenly feel drained, confused, or spiritually attacked. There are questions meant to gather information, questions meant to weaken you, questions meant to plant fear, and questions meant to manipulate your emotional or mental stability. And tonight, the Spirit of God is opening your eyes. The first creepy question the enemy often releases through a person is, are you sure you are safe? Notice how subtle it is. It comes as concern. It comes as advice. It comes as wisdom. But its purpose is to plant insecurity in your heart, because fear is the gate the enemy walks through. When the kingdom of darkness wants to destabilize you, it begins with questions designed to shake your confidence. Suddenly, you start doubting your protection, doubting your place, doubting God's covering. And many do not even realize that this small conversation was the very beginning of a spiritual attack. The moment you begin to second guess your safety, your shield of faith begins to weaken. That is why the Bible says, guard your heart with all diligence. You don't just guard your heart from actions, you guard it from conversations. Another creepy question that often precedes an attack is, what exactly are you afraid of these days? You would think it is harmless. But darkness studies your fears like a blueprint. If evil wants to find an entry point, it looks for the cracks of fear, and the enemy cannot use fear against you until he first discovers what you fear. Many people reveal their fears casually, emotionally, jokingly, and from that moment, spiritual warfare gains precision. There are conversations where the moment you speak, you feel your strength leave you. This is because some questions are not for understanding, they are for extracting power. There is also the unsettling question, so who really stands with you? When the kingdom of darkness wants to isolate you, it begins by questioning your relationships. This is the question that weakens trust, creates suspicion, and separates you from people assigned to protect you. Darkness knows it is easier to attack an isolated believer than a connected one. So it uses conversations to create division. Someone suddenly begins asking subtle questions about your friends, your mentors, your helpers. And if you lack discernment, you begin to doubt the very people God sent to strengthen you. Isolation is never the beginning of an attack. It is the conclusion of a conversation. Another eerie question that should awaken your spiritual senses is, why do you pray so much? Anyone who trivializes your spiritual discipline is not just talking. They are revealing an agenda, because prayer is the firewall of your destiny. Whenever a person begins to question your consistency with God, it's not their voice you should be listening to. It's the spirit behind their curiosity. Evil never attacks a praying person directly. It tries to talk them out of prayer first. And many believers have surrendered their mantles through casual conversations that made prayer look excessive. There is also the strange question, what would you do if everything you have suddenly disappears? This is not a question of curiosity. It is a question of prediction. Sometimes the kingdom of darkness sends conversations ahead of the attack. It probes your preparedness, your emotional stability, your resilience. It tries to see whether discouragement can crush you, whether loss can silence you. And if your answer reveals fear, panic, or hopelessness, That conversation becomes a spiritual report submitted against your destiny. That is why Jesus said, the prince of this world comes, but he finds nothing in me. Darkness tests, observes, studies through questions. Then there is the manipulative question. Why don't you just rest spiritually for a while? This is one of the most dangerous questions, because spiritual warfare doesn't always begin with hostility. Sometimes it begins with comfort. It begins with the suggestion to relax, to slow down, to reduce intensity, to put your armor aside. The enemy knows you cannot attack a person who is alert. So it first attempts to lull you into a state of spiritual sleep. And once your fire goes down, the doors open. Many people are not attacked because of weakness. They were attacked because someone talked them out of vigilance. Another creepy question the enemy throws at destiny is, are you sure you deserve what you are praying for? This question is designed to attack your identity. It aims to weaken your confidence in God's promises. When the enemy wants to stop you from pursuing greatness, it doesn't come with force, it comes with doubt. It tries to make you question your worthiness, your calling, your assignment. And the moment you begin to doubt yourself, you begin to doubt your prayers. And when you doubt your prayers, you lose the authority to stand in spiritual warfare. Every destiny that collapses begins with a voice that whispers inadequacy. There is also the disturbing question, why don't you tell me everything going on in your life? Be careful with people who seek information they do not need. The spirit of darkness feeds on details. It cannot attack what it does not understand. So it tries to extract information through emotional closeness, sympathy, or curiosity. And when you open up without discernment, you provide spiritual data that can be weaponized against you. Not every listener is a helper. Some are spiritual intelligence officers disguised as friends. Another unsettling question often asked before a spiritual attack is, what do you regret the most? This question digs for the wounds of your soul. It is designed to reopen pain, guilt, shame, and trauma. And once those emotions resurface, the enemy uses them to weaken your armor. The kingdom of darkness understands that unresolved pain is a doorway. So it looks for the memories that hurt you, the decisions that break you, the events that still haunt you. And it stirs them again through conversation so that your spiritual strength collapses under the weight of emotional vulnerability. And perhaps one of the most dangerous questions of all is, what would make you walk away from God? This is not curiosity. This is warfare. This is assessment. The enemy is studying your breaking point. It wants to know what would make you quit praying, quit believing, quit pursuing destiny. It wants to know what pressure it should apply. Anyone who asks you what could disconnect you from God is not being philosophical. They are being prophetic on behalf of darkness. Because evil studies what can make you fall before it attempts to make you fall. These questions may come gently, kindly, indirectly, but spiritually, they are alarms. They reveal that something is scanning your life, trying to discover what to touch, what to attack, what to provoke, what to steal, what to break. Many people think spiritual warfare begins at midnight, but warfare begins in conversations long before any manifestation. And if you are sensitive, you will know when a person's question is no longer human interest, but spiritual investigation. There are people whose questions carry no life, no purity, no innocence, only agenda. And when such conversations appear, your spirit must rise, your discernment must awaken, and your guard must stand firm. Because destiny is too precious to be lost to a careless conversation. And sometimes the most troubling questions don't come from a stranger. They come from someone familiar, someone who has watched your journey, observed your patterns, studied your victories and your vulnerabilities. And they approach you with a tone that sounds harmless, but the question underneath carries a strange weight in the spirit. You can be talking casually, laughing, discussing life, and suddenly a question drops in the middle of the conversation like a cold wind. Something inside you freezes. You smile on the outside, but something within your spirit whispers, be careful. This one is not ordinary. Because the enemy loves to hide spiritual probes inside familiar voices. There are people who will. ask you, so what are you planning next? And you can almost feel your spirit tighten. It's not because the question is evil in itself. Planning is normal. Progress is normal. But there are times when the curiosity is not curiosity. It is surveillance. Destiny moves in silence, and many attacks begin because someone asked a question that drew out a revelation you are not supposed to reveal. The enemy is powerless until you supply information. That is why Jesus kept silent before certain people, not because he didn't know what to say, but because they had no right to hear it. Silence itself is a weapon of warfare. Another unsettling question that often precedes spiritual trouble is, why are you suddenly so blessed? Listen very carefully. Celebration is not always celebration. Sometimes what sounds like admiration is actually evaluation. Some people are not celebrating you. They are measuring you. They are checking how far you've risen, what doors have opened for you, what opportunities are aligning, because the enemy cannot attack what he cannot quantify. When someone's joy about your blessing feels heavy, forced, or strangely insistent, pay attention. Discernment is the ability to hear the voice behind the words. Then there's the strange question, who told you this season was yours? This is the language of intimidation. Darkness tries to shake your confidence in divine timing. It tries to make you doubt that God is backing you. These questions are subtle psychological warfare. They're designed to make you feel unworthy, unprepared, unsupported. When someone wants to weaken your spiritual boldness, they begin by questioning the legitimacy of your breakthrough. And if you are not spiritually awake, you will begin to shrink, to apologize for rising, to dim your own light just to make someone comfortable. Another creepy question that should alert your spirit immediately is, what would you do if everything went wrong at once? This question is not about future planning. It is about emotional destabilization. It is meant to make you imagine disaster, to visualize collapse, to mentally step into a season God never ordained for you. The enemy loves to plant a seed of calamity before releasing the wind of calamity. Not every question is meant to inform you. Some questions are meant to weaken your shield by making you agree with negativity before negativity arrives. Destiny is not only protected by prayer, it is protected by the conversations you refuse to participate in. Sometimes you hear the question, why are you so confident something good is coming? You would think it's a normal question, but in the spirit, it is a request for you to justify hope. And any hope you cannot justify, you abandon. This question is designed to reduce your expectation because attacks thrive in the absence of expectation. Expectation is a gate that allows divine intervention to enter your life. If the enemy can make you doubt what God is doing, he can make you abandon the atmosphere that produces miracles. So he questions your confidence, not because he doubts it, but because he wants you to doubt it. Then there is the unsettling question that sounds like concern. Are you sure you can handle everything that is coming? This question disguises itself as wisdom, but it is actually intimidation. It is meant to reduce your courage. It makes you feel overwhelmed before the battle even begins. It makes you look at your destiny and say, maybe I'm not strong enough. And the moment you believe you are not strong enough, your spirit begins to collapse inward. The enemy does not win because he is powerful. He wins because he convinces you that you are not. There are also questions designed to detect your level of spiritual covering. Someone might ask, so who prays for you or who is backing you? Be very careful. This is not always concern for your soul. Sometimes it is an assessment of your spiritual defense system. Darkness understands authority. It understands covering. Before it attacks a person, it first determines who stands with that person. And these questions are a spiritual audit, an attempt to locate areas of vulnerability. If they discover you are spiritually alone, you become a target. If they discover you are spiritually covered, the attack becomes more calculated. Questions are not always for relationships. Sometimes they are for reconnaissance. Then you encounter the question, why do you trust God so much? It sounds silly, but it is powerful. This question is designed to press on your faith, to question your convictions, to push against your foundation. When darkness cannot attack your life directly, it attacks your belief. Because if your belief collapses, your life collapses naturally. The enemy answers no prayer. He just makes you stop praying. He shuts no door. He just makes you stop knocking. He blocks no miracle. He just makes you doubt you deserve one. And he begins that collapse with a conversation that targets your trust. Another strange question that should make you spiritually alert is, why don't you just let things flow naturally? Meaning, abandon discipline, abandon structure, abandon prayer, abandon intentionality. It is the language of spiritual carelessness. Before the enemy attacks, he tries to strip you of the habits that protect you. He cannot destroy a disciplined believer, so he tries to convince you that discipline is unnecessary. He wants you spontaneous, unprepared, spiritually relaxed, because relaxed soldiers fall first in battle. And then there is the question that feels harmless but is deadly in its intention. What are you waiting for before you give up? This is not the language of a friend. This is not counsel. This is not advice. This is spiritual scanning. The enemy wants to know the threshold of your endurance. What pressure must be applied? What discouragement will break you? What delay can frustrate you? What disappointment can silence you? This is the kind of question that comes when darkness is already designing an attack, and now it wants to determine how severe the attack must be to achieve its goal. And there are moments when these questions come back to back, rapid, subtle, relentless, and your spirit begins to sense that something invisible is trying to wear down your defenses. Questions that seem normal but feel wrong. Questions that feel heavier than they sound. Questions that linger in your mind long after the conversation ends. Questions that leave you spiritually uneasy, emotionally drained, mentally disturbed. Those are not just questions, they are spiritual door knockers. They are invitations, tests, assessment, and attempts. Because the enemy does not only attack the unguarded, he attacks the unprepared. And the easiest way to render a believer unprepared is to disarm them through conversations that steal discernment, destabilize faith, drain spiritual energy, expose private information, or weaken confidence in God. And when your discernment rises, when your spirit begins to pick signals, when you start noticing that the conversations around you are changing tone, when you sense that certain questions are no longer innocent but intentional, when you begin to feel the presence behind the words more than the words themselves, then you know that something unseen is studying you. Something is trying to measure the temperature of your spirit, the strength of your convictions, the depth of your resilience. You begin to feel that what you're hearing is not just curiosity, but calculation. And every spiritually sensitive person has lived through that moment when you're talking to someone and your spirit suddenly becomes alert, not frightened, just awakened. It's like a quiet alarm going off inside you. You become aware that the atmosphere around that conversation has shifted. And then you hear another question, subtle yet strangely invasive. Why do you still believe things will get better? That question is not about encouragement. It is an attempt to uproot expectation. Because spiritual attacks thrive in hopeless soil. If the enemy can make you lose sight of tomorrow, he can break your strength for today. This question seeks to disconnect you from the future God has shown you. It wants you to surrender the promise before the battle even begins. It wants you to give up while you still have strength. Many destinies were not destroyed by storms. They were destroyed by conversations that weakened the will to endure. Then there is the testing question. Have you ever wondered if all this sacrifice is worth it? The moment you hear this question, your spirit should rise. Because this is not reflection. It is temptation disguised as wisdom. It is the voice that walked into the Garden of Eden, questioning obedience, questioning sacrifice, questioning divine instruction. This question is engineered to make your consecration look foolish. It tries to convince you that the cost of obedience is too high. But understand, every time God is about to lift a man, the enemy tries to attack his sacrifice. Not with weapons first, but with questions that make sacrifice seem unnecessary. Another question that often reveals hidden darkness is, what if God doesn't come through this time? You can feel the spiritual chill that accompanies that question. It is a direct attempt to disconnect you from divine assurance. It is designed to make waiting feel pointless, prayer feel empty, and faith feel naive. When the enemy wants to weaken your expectation of a miracle, he sows the seed of doubt through a question that sounds like concern but is actually poison. But you must learn to silence such questions, because what you tolerate in your mind will eventually manifest in your life. There is also the whispering question, why don't you just keep quiet about your battles? Understand this carefully. There are times when silence is wisdom, but there are times when silence is a trap. When the enemy wants to keep you isolated in warfare, he convinces you that asking for help is a sign of weakness. This question is not designed to protect your privacy. It is designed to keep you vulnerable. Because what grows in darkness becomes stronger in darkness. When this question appears in your spirit, pay attention. Something does not want you to seek support, counsel, or prayer. Then comes the investigative question. Who do you rely on the most when you're weak? That question may appear harmless, but spiritually, it is an attempt to identify your pillars. The enemy wants to know who reinforces you so he can attack the relationship that strengthens your resistance. Many times the goal is not to destroy you directly, it is to isolate you by attacking the people who carry you in prayer, in counsel, in encouragement. That question is a search for your reinforcements. You will also hear the monitoring question, how long do you think you can keep this up? This is not about your schedule, it is about endurance. Darkness wants to know if you are close to giving up, close to burnout, close to letting go. It wants to know whether your strength is emotional or spiritual, whether your resolve is temporary or anchored. That question is not to understand you, it is to measure you. And many have unknowingly revealed their weak points through these subtle interrogations. Then there is the probing question. If you could change one painful thing in your past, what would it be? This is not always a question for healing. Sometimes it is a question designed to locate old wounds. Because old wounds, once reopened, weaken present strength. The enemy knows that unresolved pain creates spiritual leakage. If he can make you revisit the memories that once broke you, he can weaken the stability you have today. He can use old pain to create new vulnerability. You will also hear the discouraging question, why hasn't anything big happened for you yet? That question is not analysis, it is accusation. It is designed to make your journey look stagnant, your progress look insignificant, your efforts look wasted. It is meant to erode gratitude and amplify frustration. Because frustrated believers become careless believers, and careless believers become vulnerable believers. When someone asks you that question, they are not examining your life. They are trying to provoke discontentment. There is the seductive question, why don't you just take a shortcut? Beware of shortcuts. Every time the enemy wants to accelerate your downfall, he introduces an alternative route that looks fast, easy, and harmless. The question is designed to make righteousness look slow and compromise look efficient. It is meant to lure you away from process, because every destiny that avoids process becomes fragile. And sometimes the most dangerous question is the one you hear within yourself. Is all of this spiritual fight even necessary? That internal question is not your voice. It is a planted suggestion. It is the voice that wants to make you lower your spiritual armor. It wants you to relax your discipline, reduce your prayer intensity, and stop guarding your atmosphere. The battle you do not acknowledge becomes the battle you lose. And this question is designed to make you passive in a season where you must be alert. These questions come one after another, each one slowly trying to create cracks in your spiritual foundation. They come to gather information, weaken confidence, probe wounds, test resolve, assess fear, and identify openings. They are subtle, they are quiet, they are disguised. But in the realm of the spirit, they are loud alarms, warnings that something is approaching, warnings that the atmosphere around your life is being observed, that something is attempting to access the gates of your destiny, because every question is a knock and every answer is either a lock or an open door. And when these questions begin to increase in frequency, depth, and intensity, it is a sign that something wants to enter a territory it has not been authorized to enter. And then there is the unsettling question that comes wrapped in false sympathy. Do you ever feel like God is taking too long with you? It sounds empathetic, but it carries a dangerous assignment. It is designed to provoke impatience. Impatience is a spiritual weakness because impatient people step out of the timing of God and walk into traps set by the enemy. That question is not about comfort. It is a temptation wearing the mask of encouragement. It wants you to perceive delay where there is only divine preparation. Another question that signals spiritual danger is, what if your obedience is keeping you from something better? That is not a question of opportunity. It is a question of deception. It is the voice that wants you to compare obedience with compromise, righteousness with shortcuts, purity with pleasure. It tries to make you feel as though the boundaries God placed around you are limitations rather than protections. That question is engineered to create dissatisfaction with the path of holiness. There is also the accusing question. Do you really think you're as strong as people believe you are? This question is meant to introduce insecurity where confidence once lived. The enemy knows that once you start doubting your spiritual strength, you will begin to act weaker than you truly are. It wants you to break from the inside out. It wants to convince you that the version of you that prays, stands, and believes is merely an illusion. This question is an attack on identity disguised as humility. Then comes the dangerous question that often enters through people who appear close. Why don't you tell me your deepest fear? That question is not always care. It is access. Whoever knows your deepest fear holds the map to your weakest point. Darkness uses such questions to design attacks that target exactly where your courage collapses. And many people reveal this information innocently, not realizing that they have given the enemy the exact pressure point needed to destabilize them. A particularly revealing question is, what's the worst that could happen? At first, it sounds like casual speculation, but spiritually, it is an invitation to imagine disaster. It is an invitation to open your mind to negative possibilities. It is an attempt to align your thoughts with an outcome the enemy desires. The moment your imagination agrees with fear, your spirit loses ground. This question tries to make you prophesy defeat unconsciously. Then there is the subtle question, why don't you slow down with all these spiritual things? This one is particularly dangerous because it comes as advice. It seems reasonable, but it is designed to create spiritual laziness. It is intended to interrupt momentum, break consistency, and lower your guard. Spiritual attacks rarely succeed against fervent believers. They succeed against believers who have been persuaded to relax their intensity. Another creepy question that reveals a shift in the realm of the spirit is, what if people discover who you really are? This question is designed to awaken shame where there is none. It is meant to make you feel unworthy, exposed, disqualified. It tries to make you believe that your past disqualifies your future. This voice is not about repentance. It is about condemnation. And condemnation is always a precursor to spiritual oppression. You may also hear the manipulative question, what would you trade for peace of mind? Understand this, anything you trade outside the will of God becomes the doorway for the enemy to enter your life. This question tries to negotiate your destiny. It wants you to exchange long-term victories for short-term relief. It wants to lure you into making emotional decisions that have spiritual consequences. Then there is the question that often comes in moments of vulnerability. Why don't you just let go of everything and start over? It sounds freeing, but it is actually destructive. It tries to convince you to abandon commitments, covenants, responsibilities, and assignments. It pushes you toward escape rather than endurance. It is not a suggestion for a new beginning. It is a suggestion for destruction disguised as freedom. Sometimes you hear the investigative question, who would miss you if you disappeared? This question carries a coldness that is not human. It is meant to isolate you emotionally and spiritually. It wants you to feel disconnected, unvalued, unimportant. Because when a person believes their presence has no meaning, they become spiritually weakened and psychologically vulnerable. That question is a weapon, not a conversation. And then there is the dark whisper that comes when the atmosphere is heavy. Does it even matter if you keep fighting? This question is not asking. You can feel it pushing. It pushes against your purpose, against your endurance, against your will to stand. It wants to create exhaustion inside you so that you surrender battles you are moments away from winning. The enemy only asks this question when he sees something glorious approaching. These questions compile. They gather like shadows around the edges of your mind, attempting to blur your vision, weaken your stance, cloud your discernment. And the spiritually sensitive begin to notice that these conversations do not come randomly. They come in patterns. They come before breakthroughs. They come before transitions. They come when the enemy knows something about your future that you have not yet seen. And hear me. Whenever these strange questions begin to rise, whether through people, through thoughts, through sudden conversations, or through the whispers that try to settle in your spirit, know that it is not the time to fear, and it is not the time to retreat. It is the time to stand up with understanding. Because the presence of these questions is not proof that you are weak, it is proof that you are rising. They do not gather around empty destinies. They gather around people who are carrying something the enemy is afraid of. When these questions start surrounding your life, you are not being studied because you are fragile. You are being studied because you are dangerous in the spirit. You are being observed because the enemy sees what God is building in you. He sees the doors forming. He sees the breakthroughs aligning. He sees the mantle settling. He sees the future you have not yet touched. And every question is an attempt to stop you from becoming the version of yourself that hell fears. But you must respond with discernment. You must protect your atmosphere. You must guard your focus. You must learn when to speak and when to be silent, when to explain and when to withhold, when to answer and when to walk away. Because in this season of your life, silence will protect you. Discernment will defend you. Wisdom will elevate you. And understanding will shield you from battles you were never designed to fight. So let the questions come. Your spirit will expose them. Let the darkness try. Your light will reveal it. Let the enemy whisper. Your discernment will rebuke it. Because you are not a victim waiting to be attacked. You are a soldier being prepared. You are not walking into danger unarmed. You are walking into destiny covered. And every strange question that rises around you is simply confirmation that God has placed something on your life that cannot be ignored. Walk with understanding. Guard your gates. Keep your atmosphere pure. Refuse to reveal what God has not asked you to share. Refuse to bow to intimidation. Refuse to surrender your expectation. For the questions of darkness may surround you, but the voice of God anchors you. The power of God defends you, and the purpose of God preserves you. Stand firm. You are too chosen to be confused. You are too anointed to be manipulated. And you are too lifted to be stopped. Because no question asked by darkness can overturn what God has already answered in your destiny.